give it up to another nation. Them country bad love them homeland. We'll never give it up to another nation. This a we we the fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. Follow me now. This a we the fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. This a me name is Pupa. Believe me, come from the Billy City area. 110% Belize and proud of it. No, tell me about maritime area. Long time ago, agreement by the slave master. Talking about the head and the Belize and dollar because patriots, all people who love them.
The 6th. It's Sunday morning from now until 12 o'clock. It's Sunday review time where we make sense of the news, the only news review talk show in Belize. I'm the producer and host, Sister YaYa, Marin Coleman, our co-host. We're Trinbagadian. That's what I say?
No, Trinbagonian.
Trinbagonian. I want to get it. Trinbagonian, brother. Mutota, revolutionary, and the Pepe that is Sunday review pot. And then we have a good brother, not a Trinbagonian, but currently living in Canada, brother Professor Isaac Saney. Morning, brothers.
Good morning. Morning, Sister YaYa. Morning. It's good to be on Sunday Review once again.
Yeah.
And good morning to our listening audience, and good morning to my good brother from the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, brother Isaac Saney.
Yeah. Good morning to you, and a solidarity embrace, revolutionary embrace to everyone.
Give thanks. We have a number of stories lined up this morning. And so, Brother Akko, kind of know that Brother Akko run the show, you know. I had just the face now since January 2025 that Brother Akko had the straight. Now, making it play humbly, so that he choose the new stories there, and I rate her. You know, I don't mingle up with anybody, so I rate her. But this week, in all seriousness, here in Belize, as some people may know or some people may not know, former employees of the National Telephone Company, Belize Telemedia Limited, some former employees have been holding the company and the government of Belize through the Labor Department accountable for not adhering to my understanding, even though the VTL attorney said different, to the Caribbean Court of Justice ruling. Severance is what one employer legally do to an employee. There are very few reasons why you may not be eligible for it, but for the most part, and if you read that flyer, go to the Facebook page, you will see. So BTL owes severance to former BTL employees. The CCJ ruling find out that they never made it paid. At that time, they had a pension scheme where I think the employees put 3%, BTL put 3%, and BTL said at all the severance be enough for them 3%. But when they asked them to produce it, they couldn't, and then the attorney conceded. They said, listen, we never paid. So they never made it tell the truth. They never made it pay the severance. Now, BTL have paid severance in the past, I think up to maybe 1994. And either 1994-95, the labor law changed, I believe, and some attorney advised BTL that they don't have to pay severance no more, so they stopped. Now, BTL had a press conference last Thursday. And one of the good things BTL do is they live stream the press conference. One of the best things BTL come do, they live stream the press conference so all Belizeans could listen to the entire conversation and hear how the people in the front desk talk to Belizean people. Now, I don't usually go to press conferences because I'm a grassroots journalist. I don't do what traditional journalists do. But I had to go, in the interest because I'm in a solidarity with working class people of Belize. And remember, this is not just Belize. This is for workers in the entire Caribbean region. You do severance, and they have different reasons why you're eligible for severance. But your employer have a legal duty for pay your severance for most of the different categories. Hear that plain. Employers have one legal duty. They're not if they want, they don't want favor. They call it like one cushion that after you retire, regardless of why you retire or resign, depending on how much years of work for the company, you're going to leave money for investments. So I just want to quickly set to Belizeans why we need to pay attention. Because it's a Belizean people business. Now, then use a real live example. Former employee and unionist of BTL, Paul Perriott. For him, monthly salary from November 11, 1999 to February 7, 2011, that was $3,171.47 Belizean money. The severance, the main amount owed in a severance, the $8,227.49. I refund for the employer. There's the interest rate at 6% per year, long-term interest. Amount interest was calculated on the $8,227.49 severance only. Interest for 14.8 years at 6% is $7,329. $7,329. Interest based on what BTL said at a press conference, short-term interest, $8,227.49 severance only, time period November 5th to February 26th, days counted 117. Christy, if you could show that flyer for me, $158.24. Only hear the difference that the other press conference about. Then they tell Belizean people, and then they use one divide and conquer action. So we don't have to go along with this group. We could come to we 1-1. And it's, I mean, people have the human right if they want to go 1-1, but it's not recommended that you do because BCWJ said we work with this. We didn't hold this particular employer accountable for years, and we know, say, if you're not holding accountable, then the CJ for the CCJ interpret the law for them and tell them, listen, by Belize labor law, I think section 183 and 184, if I'm not mistaken, you don't have to pay people severance at the time when they stop work. Now, one last thing about the story. The attorney for the Belize Telemedia Limited, that may also the attorney for him case. I part me one judge for many years, I believe. I wanted to bring this up to say that this attorney for BTL very familiar with 6% interest on severance on the time at the time of the last date of employment, because that's what he asked for when he began to represent the PA, when the PA made the whole state accountable for benefits where he say he worked for I think 20 plus years I never get. So this attorney can't say he don't know because he may ask for your papa. So when I got out and protest, I say it may good enough for your papa, but it's not good enough for Belizean workers. But this stuff for all Caribbean workers in the English speaking region, I would say that your employer owe your severance. I mean, let's say there are 5 categories. There might be 2 categories where you're not eligible for, but for the most part, you're eligible for it unless you do something really terrible and get a benefit. But this is the way holding power to account look like and feel like. And I appreciate the step out a road, then call talk shows. They really engage and that they step out a road, then call talk shows. They really engage and that is beautiful, Belizean people. Continue for listen attentively, think for yourself, ask questions, hold yourself and other people accountable. And there's no need for a cuss, holler, and scream and a broke up thing. They're not that with their pan. Thanks to the Belize Communication Workers for Justice group. Then the empowering people, so we understand our responsibility as employees and employers. And I have to say, shame on the unions. You know, I almost don't hear nothing from the union that Belize. If the Belize Communication Workers union may they do what they for do, this group may have to farm. But if I remember, there was an uprising in 2005, primarily by these same people who know the on the street, who made the uprising in 2005 and make some gains for workers. So thanks, Brother Akko, for giving me 10 minutes. I may just have to get that on the record. Christelle, I don't know if you're able to show any of the images there as yet. I just want people to see some clips, because I made a research a case by the BTL attorney, what he do for his dad. And I find an article in the Mandala newspaper, and then I find another article in a News 5 story that which one that Christy? That a Mandala story. Former appeals justice Samuel Lugole, which sues government. So you could go look for that online, and then you also go look on the Channel 5 news story where actually show images and a screenshot some of the images where show images of the like how much money that judge. I remember there are Belizean people money, that Belizean money to pay when they say you have to pay out then thing that we money to pay out then thing. And so what I'm going to show is how much money, like the length of time he worked, the salaries were claimed for a period of time, and then it goes on because I'm going to give one notice of intent, and in that notice that I want to say specifically, where it's an interest at the rate of 6% per annum pursuant to section 173 and 176 of the senior courts. So I just to show now from doing research, we have the evidence that the attorney definitely know that the labor laws, I believe, say employers for this, and so that the government, I believe, through the Labor Department, they fail to enforce the Caribbean Court of Justice ruling and hold the employer BTL accountable. And then quick for hala go to court, but that for we money to pay for them court cases. Would prefer pay attorneys and other people than for pay the employers who work for the severance? Chairman, remember I said though, only organize people and save the people. So big respect to the Belize.
Okay. So, Sister YaYa, just to comment, and I think Brother Saney can comment on this. In the Caribbean, historically, capital has always had the upper hand. So the workers, and one of the mistakes we make in analyzing our history at times is not understanding that the enslaved were also workers, right, who were exploited by a system. That system never changed. It just, as Hobadu, the late Hobabu said, it just engaged in continuity and adjustments. So the same model of extraction and exploitation that existed on the plantation is the same model that evolved into what you may call colonial era and after colonialism. Now, there was a time in the Caribbean when we had a policy of what was called industrialization by invitation. I remember that very clearly. So a number of these, the factories that you would have seen in China, sweatshops, where people, so they call it manufacturing, but what it was really was, and it still exists in Haiti today, where they make baseballs and so on, right? But in the Caribbean, we had American and other kinds of firms that came to Trinidad, say they were making shirts. I remember we had Elite and so on. And what they were doing really wasn't making shirts. They were putting together the shirts. So the collar would come from someplace, the arm would come from someplace, and the rest of the shirt, and people sew that, and then it was exported, and they call that a manufacturing industry. So it was a policy of what is called industrialization by invitation, in which companies were invited and given tax holidays, right? So they would give a government to sign a contract in Trinidad with a particular company, and they'll be given a tax holiday of 10 years. And then they were supposed now to then start paying taxes to the government for operating in the country. So what happened was when the tax holiday cleared, they lacked the political will. They lacked the political will to enforce it. They take bribes, they get a little trust that they can't get a visa to the US or the UK, and that's it. They are not going to fight for the people. And the last point I want to make before I have Brother Saney speak about this is what recently happened in Trinidad with ArcelorMittal, an Indian steel company. You know, we had a steel company called ISCOT, the Iron and Steel Company in Trinidad, which was owned mostly by the government. The usual thing is they staff these companies with party hacks and incompetent people, and they fail. And then they said, well, you know what, we need to bring a private partner. So they brought in ArcelorMittal, the big steel company from India. Mittal ran that steel company with free gas and a number of concessions the government gave. And then he left and never paid the severance. Even the parts the workers put in, they never got it. Up to now, I think they're still struggling, if I'm not mistaken. I haven't followed that case recently. But that is the pattern of capital in the Caribbean. And this is why people must understand this narrow party politics that we seem to adhere to, whether it's in Trinidad or Belize or whatever. These systems have failed us. And this is just another example of what it is. And we have to come up with a different dispensation. That's what I was saying on that.
Brother Akka, Brother Isaac?
No, I think Brother Akko has said everything very clearly and succinctly. And at the point about when it comes, these have to resolve politically. And of course, when we get trapped into the political system and the revolving door, they have the same policies, right? Always anti-worker, right? And Brother Akko knows better than me. There have been times where, progressive movements, trade unions, right, seem to have this habit of basically supporting and congregating behind the party in opposition, right? Even though that party has had a previous history when it's in power of being very anti-worker. And so we need independent worker politics, independent working class politics, right? And we need a state, in a sense, that is ready to control and corral not only capital within the country, but capital from outside, right? And his point about how international capital basically will go from country to country, using the state, taking advantage of laws, sometimes either ambiguous or sometimes directly written to benefit them, is something we have to tackle. And this is what we see: massive austerity, and it's right across. So the story you're talking about here, right? We have cases here in Canada of corporations just completely, declaring bankruptcy. Okay, and the bankruptcy laws in Canada and the United States protect, the major capitalist interests.
Sure, they will align with the goals and except for exceptional leaders. No, one of our guests here, Professor Watson, gave me an example, and we spoke about it just last week. He said at the height of the Black Power movement in Barbados, the 1970s, when workers moved beyond the trade unions and the political and made demands. He said the white business elite, which still to some extent controls Barbados business, he said one of the white businessmen said, to resolve this discrimination and this disparity with workers, let us move to profit sharing. Said that was a proposal the white businessman put on the table. The trade union leader Walcott was part of the BLP, said workers are not ready for profit sharing. The union said it. So here it is, the employer, who is supposed to be the enemy of the worker, seeing this through a national lens, okay, bourgeois or not, decide, what, to resolve this thing, the workers have a point here. Let's move to profit share. The union leader, and he was a senator and representing the workers in the parliament. He said workers are ready for that. And this is where Professor Watson called the term, you can be pro-worker but not pro-working class.
Yeah, exactly.
Because as a class, he did not have respect for the workers.
Yeah.
But to get them little benefits here, a boots and a coverall and little petty benefits, which is more like charitable, he is for that. But for the group of people to be empowered financially, economically, or politically, unions are not for that. And that is why they make these alliances, all right, of convenience, and then they are bitten in the behind when they are betrayed. And that's the classic case in Trinidad right now, where the major union is aligned with this government that is totally anti-worker. And that's our reality in the Caribbean. We need a new consciousness.
Yeah.
Right? We need a new consciousness, and this is what we are not debating. No, issues like reparations and so things, those are important issues, but those are not transformative issues.
Yeah.
The transformative issue is changing the political and economic system. Yeah. That's the real transformative issues.
Yeah. I think that's a very powerful point, right? And so, I am involved our colleagues are involved in the reparations movement, right? And the idea of reparations is important. It's about fun, at the end of the day, you have to have fundamental socioeconomic political transformation, right? Okay. I mean, that's fundamental, right? And at the center of that, right, is a society, right, in which those who produce the wealth, right, are the ones who are democratically in control of how that wealth is produced and, more importantly, how it is distributed and so on, right? And, this issue of people that, who are supposedly representing the workers' interests and so forth, continually, bowing down before the state, right? Accepting positions, right? Compromising themselves is something that has left me flabbergasted. But I think the point that Brother Ako makes very importantly is that trade unions themselves emerge within the bowels of capitalism, right? Okay, to basically, because what often happens here in Canada, for Canadian example, is that concessions were made to workers, and how we got the our universal healthcare system, how we got a whole series of social programs, come from struggles.
One more story. I feel that the African reparations, how I understand it, is always connected to everyday people's lives. That if I just translate it in our language, so then could say why African reparations is more than a paycheck. And again, the people who often they represent and talk to it, that people were not genuinely investing in the working class, even though most of them come from the working class. What story I could squeeze it in about?
Well, this is an important story because this deals with life and not just in Belize, but in the Caribbean. So I am reluctant to move on at this point because he made a very important point about we got what we benefits we got was from struggle in the street. As people of African descent or as working class people, it is through struggle and through the street. What has happened now is that we have become so enamored and so what I call fascinated by the so-called political process that we have been defanged, that we are almost intellectually losing our ability to understand that there are times when you have to leave the what I call the formats that the system allows you to and move beyond it to get what you need. And that is a lesson that we have to learn in the Caribbean, or relearn again in the Caribbean.
I agree, and that's why I have so much respect for the Belize Communication Workers for Justice. Because as then they lead, then they bring the wider community with them by sharing the knowledge. And that are distinctly different about this group of people is that then they demonstrate for their ability for think, for reason, for listen, and for engage people. So at any point, the individual could sit with the material, could listen to it, and say, this makes sense. I could say how this apply to me. And one of the big takeaways what happened Friday, which really surprised me, because I never noticed, there were a couple of people there from the former employees from the electricity company. Then they say that they have the same issues what BTL workers have. Now, if them workers never come out collectively, I don't know if we may ever know that the BEL workers have a similar issue. One former employee from BTL said, well, to be truthful, a number of the unions for their CBA have the same wording what the BTL CBA have. So it would be true for a number of employers that they had their severance in a pension scheme, which is not what should be. Your pension scheme is very different from your severance, and even if you put it in there, you have to demonstrate clearly that that severance really in there. And let's not forget, BTL did pay former, I think 50-something former employees at 6% at the time of their resignation, at the time they left the company. So they're not like BTL, not familiar with this. They are. The question is, why then keep the, I know. So what I'm going to do today, send one open letter to the Prime Minister, then put it in at the Amandala, and ban full page at the Amandala. The Prime Minister initially made it say, pay them people. The Labour Minister said, pay them people. No, the Prime Minister, they change him out. He instead of told, look here, man, only got to fire now, only group now. Look at take the money what the people and say forgive. On here a big disparity in at the 6% for all employees, and they're not do it at the time when they stop work. So what are going to the Prime Minister believes? What make you to change him out? Now, one of the things when nobody not really want to talk about, there's one name.
Position of what you may call traditional capitalism to neoliberalism is cartels and consolidations and monopolies. Right? What they are doing is buying out the competition, so that you have monopolies. And then when you do that, you can then drive down wages, make demands of the government, sabotage and say, okay, we are the only game in town. This is what is happening. You know, I had to go and open an account in a bank last week. So this bank, it had one name when I opened the account. It has been bought over about 5 times. When I went to the new version of the bank, I thought they didn't have my name. All my name was in the system. Neoliberalism now, somebody call it hyper-imperialism.
Yeah.
You know, so these are the realities, and unless we understand the economics of capitalism and the politics of capitalism, because we have a tendency to believe it is the only political system or only organized system of economics, which is Thatcher tried to impose it by coining the term TINA. There is no other alternative. This is why they want to destroy Cuba, because Cuba is an alternative. Go ahead.
No, so Billy, point, that's the whole point. What we're seeing, getting back to it, is increasing monopolization and actually increasing direct intervention of these monopolists, right, into this. Cuba is not is being destroyed, right? Okay, it's being destroyed because it's an alternative example, and you want to demonstrate that you want to shatter any idea of independence, but you also demonstrate that things such as socialism or anything anti-capitalist cannot succeed and so forth. And so they're determined to do that, right? And so this monopolization, we see, is completely ruining, not only social life, but it's actually going to ruin the planet because everybody's forgotten about the ecological catastrophe that unfolds over us, right? And in fact, they're happy to do it. They're happy to burn the world down if they can't control it.
Wow, I thought I was going to give my little 10-minute story and then Brother Akko want to, but I just wanted the beauty of Sunday Review and having people who know differently and have evidence-based conversation for broaden the conversation so we could all benefit from it in our own interests as people in the Caribbean region. Big thanks, Brother Isaac and Brother Akko. And take our first break. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
For decades, BEL has powered Belize's growth and progress, lighting homes, energizing industries, and fueling national development. But in a world reshaped by extreme weather patterns, digital transformation, and evolving customer needs, the future of energy demands a new approach, ensuring energy security for generations. At BEL, we are more than an energy provider. We work to safeguard Belize's energy future, which will have demand response programs, where customers will be able to shift use during peak hours to take advantage of the new time of use or off-peak rate structures, customer energy portals, real-time insights and tools to track usage and manage energy smarter, smart metering, advanced metering infrastructure, faster, safer service and actionable energy insights, distributed generation, integrating rooftop solar, microgrids and battery storage for two-way power flows into the national grid. Together, we are bringing
away to San Pedro for 3. Visit us at www.smart-bz.com for more information or sign up at any showroom today. Smart, bringing people together.
At Atlantic Bank, your convenience is our priority. Our contact center is designed to enhance your banking experience. With a wide range of customer service options, you save time and effort. You can easily call in to block or unblock your debit and credit cards, perform account inquiries, and access detailed card information. Whether you need assistance with online banking, merchant support, or general inquiries, our team is ready to help. For providing you with exceptional service and the tools you need to manage your finances conveniently and securely. Take full advantage of our easy-to-use contact center services.
What is good for the government cannot be bad for the people. What is good for the government cannot be bad for the people. And what is good for the people cannot be bad for the government.
We came a long way. It's like over 16 years that it was basically like 2-3 houses in that area.
It was wild. One high bush like jungle. I want to take my lick. It was wild. One high bush like jungle. I want to take my lick.
And so on. And so the headline is from a speech given by the president of Cuba, Miguel Diaz-Canel Bermudez. And the headline is, "We will fight, we will struggle, we will resist, we will transform, and above all, adversity and imperial threats. We will rise and triumph." which I think is a very important point. It is showing that the Cuban people are not defeated. They are optimistic and confident about the future. So let me just read parts of the speech and then we can discuss it. So it is a celebration on February 24th. And he said, today, February 24th, we are gathered for a date that transcends the calendar. In the history of Cuba, this day is laden with profound meanings that intertwine like threads of the same fabric, that of our sovereignty. On February 24th, 1895, the necessary war resumed with the cry of independence or death. In Cuba, patria o muerte, thus fulfilling Jose Marti's vision. On that same day, but in 1899, General Maximo Gomez victoriously entered. In 1919, the people ratified the new constitution. In 1919, the people ratified the new constitution of the Republic. A century ago, on this very day, the local bodies of people's power were established. With them, an essential principle of the revolution took concrete form. The power emanates from the people, is exercised in their name, and owes its allegiance first and foremost to their needs and hopes. It was and remains the most authentic democracy, and of the will for citizens from their communities to decide the destiny of the nation. This is a day to look back with profound respect, but above all to look forward with clarity that these times demand. Because in today's world, a 50th anniversary celebration can never be an exercise in nostalgia. It must be first and foremost a call for action. So I will stop here on that. I think it's very important. I think around that time, I think it's a very important statement from the Cuban president, very important speech that points a way forward for those who are struggling to transform the country and to create a new democracy and what Cuba calls a socialist democracy. So,
Brother Akko, I have to say, what a difference between that nation state leader's mindset, courage, and speech compared to for other one at Trinidad and Tobago.
Get to that.
Yeah.
Brother Isaac, you want to have any comments on that?
Yeah, I'll just say, like, as someone who focuses a lot on Cuba, I spend a lot of time in Cuba. I'd say, like, one, the speech itself, it's so rooted in analysis and in history, right? Okay, and more importantly, I think the point that really drags up because as the groundswell, and I'm operating here in Canada, and Canada is the largest source of foreign investment and tourists face this unprecedented attack from the United States. So it really truly stands out. And as we've said before in a previous segment, Cuba, and we were talking about in between, Cuba represents this example, right? We were talking about, and Brother Akko was talking about that, with the monopolization of the world and the neoliberalization of the world, there's this idea that there's no alternative except for this horrible system we live in. And, Margaret Thatcher coined Tina, there is no alternative, right? This is the only world we can have. And then Francis Fukuyama, when the Soviet Union Eastern Bloc collapsed, came up with the end of history thesis, right? Not that people wouldn't be doing things, but that history had reached its socioeconomic and a political system conclusion in in this world we now live in, right? And so Cuba represents a counter example. It represents the possibility of trying to create a society with all of the zigs and zags, and so forth, and obstacles it faces and contradictions. A society focused on building one where human beings are at the center as opposed to profit and so forth. And history does matter, right? And quite often, I'm teaching a course now on Cuba, and I talk to my students that one of the important things that stand out is how the Cuban Revolution itself is not Cuba for those 3 years, right? And particularly for Black Cubans who make very significant advances. And of course, the U.S. intervenes, right? Not only to take and rip Cuba from Spain so they can assert their own control and transform Cuba into a protectorate, into a neo-colony, but to reverse the social gains made in Cuba, particularly of Black Cubans, right? And so when the Cuban Revolution triumphs in 1959, as that President Diaz-Canel points out, right? He alludes that this is fulfilling the Antonio Maceo, who was the Bronze Titan, right? Who was a major, significant, perhaps the most important general in the 1868 to 1878 war, and then in the 1895 to 1898 war. So the Cuban Revolution is an attempt to fulfill these historical aspirations for two things. One, to achieve general self-determination countries. And the last point I'd like to make, the last time I was in Cuba, I was there for the what was maybe the last event that was being organized for the first decade of people of African descent, right? And within the Cubans gave for the first decade of people of African descent, right? And within the Cubans gave an incredible in terms of other leaders across the Caribbean, across the region, and across the world.
Brother Isaac, we could squeeze in quickly if you want to squeeze in our story, Brother Akko, because we have 10 minutes.
One comment I want to make to support his point is a statement Fidel made before he died. This speech is about we have to imagine a different world. And one of the points he made is that we have to imagine a different world where poverty is not normalized.
Yeah.
We believe poverty is normal, and we give that metaphysical interpretations, or even a religious interpretation, that there will always be poor people. You have a world in which there are enough resources for everyone to live comfortably. What has happened? We have let a few capture our resources through the system that we have in every country around the world, this capitalist order. And so they monopolize, and they have generational wealth. Their children don't have to work for the next 100 years. You understand what I'm saying? Because they have accumulated enough wealth, which they are not prepared to share. So we have to imagine a different world in order for things to be different.
And if I may share a quick story that sort of illustrates this in terms of Cuba, many of us, will read the UN Human Development, the impact of neocolonialism, and of course, facing an unprecedented economic war from the United States. And so Fidel kept on asking detailed questions about these children. Who are they? And the guy kept on giving these statistics. And Fidel said, listen, who are their names? Where do they live? Right? Okay. And that was the idea of basically, human beings themselves, right? Okay, not just numbers, right? We have to actually intervene in lives. And there was this famous case just recently where, with Cuba facing this massive economic war from the United States, it has very significant impacts on Cuba itself. And they were talking about the vulnerable people in Cuba. And, there was a minister who made some insane comments. And Miguel Diaz-Canel responded with a speech. And I remember writing about this, using Cabral's, famous saying, claim no easy victories, tell no lies, right? And he said, listen, we have vulnerable people in our society. We have people suffering, and we do not abandon them, right? And so this issue of not criminalizing, not marginalizing, not stereotyping, not stigmatizing those who are poor and powerless stands in stark contrast to what's happening in Canada, what's happening in the so-called developed world and so forth, where people who have, been victimized by the system, right? A system that generates inequality, that exploits and oppresses, have been stigmatized, in fact, seen almost as surplus humanity, right? Cuba stands, I think, in opposition to that. And I should also add, we must not forget, right? Yes, we tend to focus a lot on Cuba, and Cuba is important. We also see other struggles unfolding in the rest of the world. And what's happening in the Sahel, what's happening in Niger, Mali, but particularly Burkina Faso, right, are also examples of people trying to create alternatives to this unjust, oppressive, and exploitative world that is not only destroying the possibility for true human dignity, but possibly will destroy the ecology. And without the ecology, okay, how will we survive as a species?
And the one point I want to make on that statement, they fired the minister who made that statement.
Yeah, they had to go. It was a completely ridiculous
for making that statement.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Okay, Brother Akko, we got 6 minutes.
All right, so the next story we have here is out of St. Vincent. And again, it has to do with Cuba. And you all know, most of, possibly our listening audience would know, that there was a CARICOM conference recently. And there's a commentator in St. Vincent who was one of our guests here, Comrade Jomo Thomas. And the headline is condemning Cuba while embracing Arab despots. So there was a number of Arab leaders, Arab states represented at this conference. And so I would read a couple of the lines from the thing. He said, it begins with, the delusion lies with those who take the doings of the Trump regime as anything more than an edifice built on lies and illusion. Oh, this is a quote. It represents an inherently unstable interim, not an error. So let me repeat that. It's a quote from a guy. The delusion and lies with those who take the doings of the Trump regime as anything more than an edifice built on lies and illusion. It represents an inherent unstable interim, not an era. So it basically saying this is something temporary. So CARICOM's 50th anniversary summit opened with much talk about democracy, sovereignty, and dictatorship. Kamala Persad-Bissessar, Trinidad's shameful prime minister, this is my term, it's not in the article, was effusive in her praise for Mr. Trump and Secretary Rubio. None of the leaders dared to stand up for Cuba and express gratitude for its assistance. In fact, Cuba was put on trial. Images from the opening ceremony told a story that might have escaped many viewers. We saw Arab men from rich Middle Eastern states occupying prominent seats in the audience. The hypocrisy was striking. Cuba was condemned as a dictatorship without democracy, competitive elections, and the rule of law. Saudis, Qataris, and Kuwaitis were in that room. None of these countries host competitive election. All of them are dictatorships. But to paraphrase former American President Harry Truman, they may be sons of a bitch, but they are our sons of a bitch. And that was a term Truman used to describe one of the guys in Nicaragua. The hypocrites who howl about Cuba's need to democratize their eyes to these blaring contradictions. They see no evil, hear no evil, yet continue to justify and condemn evil whenever it serves their interests. Evidently, money can buy respect. So rich despotic Arabs can hobnob at CARICOM summit. Military capability generates fear if not respect. North Korea gets the worst press, but it owns nuclear weapons. Trump dares not uncircle or threaten to bomb it out of existence. Until humanity evolves a more sophisticated humanitarian consciousness, evil will be celebrated as glamour and glory. So I will stop there, given our time schedule. But it's an important calling out of all these Caribbean leaders who talk about democracy when it comes to Cuba and multiple elections. When these Arab leaders are family dictatorship, 6,000-7,000 of them is the princes and the families who run these countries, chopping off people's head. But you have nothing to say about the prominent at CARICOM and you criticizing Cuba. So, any comment?
Brother Isaac, you got 3 minutes.
Yeah, especially when, so many since these countries, at least in some parts of the social development, right? And also, if they're allowed to crush Cuba's independence, what does it mean for the rest of the region? Do they have no honor, of understanding or any belief in Caribbean independence and in Caribbean sovereignty and in an independent Caribbean voice on the world stage? So these things are truly really ridiculous developments, right? But what's interesting is we have some former Caribbean states people who are now out of power, obviously, who have spoken very strongly about Cuba. And through the Global African Congress, there's an attempt to get some of them, right, to actually lead a mission to Africa, right, to encourage much more material aid, particularly in terms of oil and fuel supply to Cuba as well, right? So these are some of the key issues, right, that I think Brother Ako has clearly highlighted and underscored.
Big thanks for that. We'll have to go to our break.
For 3 people, introducing Smart Trio. Why pay as low as $45 per person? Perfect for couples or close friends. Smart Trio. 3 lines, 1 smart choice. Sign up now and you could win a Trio getaway to San Pedro for 3. Visit us at www.smart-bz.com for more information or sign up at any showroom today. Smart, bringing people together.
Whereas Her Excellency Lily Lee Weng-Shu has labored diligently on behalf of the improvement of and the benefit of the country of Belize and its people, and whereas she has contributed her time, energy, and intelligence, often at great sacrifice to herself, to making Belize a better place for all our people. Now therefore, by the power invested in Her Excellency Dame Froila Salam, Governor General, acting on behalf of the Prime Minister, Honorable John Briceño, and on behalf of a grateful nation, we proclaim that the Order of Distinction be vested upon Her Excellency Lily Lee Weng-Shu.
Each activity she worked on has built on the work of her predecessors, bringing visions to reality. As such, This award
Friends of Belize. What a tremendous honor.
Con la banca en línea, apoyo para comercios o consultas generales. Nuestro equipo está listo para ayudarte. Para mayor comodidad, si todos los operadores están ocupados, puedes dejar tu número y un operador te devolverá la llamada lo antes posible para asegurarse de que recibas el apoyo que necesitas. Para mayor seguridad, es posible que necesitemos verificar tu identidad con un conjunto de preguntas sencillas. Recuerda, Atlantic Bank nunca solicitará tu nombre de tu usuario ni contraseña de Atlantic Online por llamada telefónica, mensaje de texto o correo electrónico, asegurando que tu información personal permanezca segura y protegida. Nuestro equipo de apoyo está disponible de lunes a viernes, de 8 a.m. a 6 p.m., en inglés y en español. Simplemente marca al 223-1212. Esta es la línea dedicada para nuestro centro de contacto. Atlantic Bank se compromete a brindarte
We've got service with a smile. That's for sure. We've got everything in that store. We've got variety, everything, quality, everything, quantity, everything. At Builders Hardware, variety, everything, quality, everything, quantity, everything. At Builders Hardware, builders who build with a passion and skill. Go to Builders Hardware. Guatemala. This a GTA, we don't care. Nobody do it to no Guatemala. This time me name is Pupa. Belize me come from the Belize City area. 110% Belize.
I keep the story up, you know.
Oh my, listen. I think this, I tell you the truth. I need to get some sleep. We're having a conversation doing break, and I didn't think we'd up on air. And we're going up on air, we're not up on air. Oh my gosh. All right. Recess.
Was that he was kidnapped by the Trinidad police and brought to Trinidad without any kind of value or respect for his human rights. So I myself have in conversation repeated this issue that he was kidnapped, because the problem is that we have something in the Caribbean called the RSS, the Regional Security Services, a military institution which was set up in the wake of the Grenada Revolution by the US. And so the RSS has done a lot of things in the Caribbean, and most of us are not familiar. So we thought this was a case again of the RSS in collaboration with the Trinidad police kidnapping someone on the behest of the Trinidad government and extraditing them to Barbados. But what Mayor Motley saying at this session, and I will read the headline: Motley rejects Kamala's claim Brent Thomas, who was involved, was abducted from Barbados. Says it's defamatory in the extreme and a scurrilous lie. Okay? So let me read the article. A scurrilous lie and defamatory in the extreme. This was how Barbados Prime Minister Mayor Motley yesterday described comments made by Prime Minister Kamala Persad-Bissessar during her speech at the opening CARICOM 50 Heads of Government meeting on Tuesday. Motley was responding to Persad-Bissessar's claim that Trinidad and Tobago businessman Brent Thomas had been kidnapped from Barbados. During the opening ceremony, Persad-Bissessar said in October 2022, then sitting Trinidad and Tobago government coordinated the kidnapping of a Trinidad citizen from another Caribbean CARICOM state. He was visiting another CARICOM state and he was kidnapped. Our Supreme Court has ruled that he was kidnapped. He was placed in handcuffs, transported to the airport, and then back to Trinidad. I think an RSS plane was used to transport him. He was kidnapped. This is Prasad Bisesa. She was referring to the 2022 arrest of Thomas at a hotel in Barbados and his return to Trinidad aboard a military aircraft. Although the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service did not initiate formal extradition proceedings. A High Court judge later ruled the act an unlawful abduction, prompting an apology from the Trinidad and Tobago government, with other countries accepting liability for constitutional breaches. But Motley yesterday flatly rejected the characterization of the incident as a kidnapping. To describe it as a kidnapping is a most unfortunate term because arrest warrants were presented by the Trinidad police to the Barbados police. As to what happened, we don't know because we don't get involved in operational matters. So as it transpired, we in fact knew nothing about it. It was only when this matter became a public issue that we had to launch an investigation into what transpired. And it was clear that the Trinidad and Tobago police, as has been practiced for decades in this region, would have supplied an arrest warrant which the Barbados police would have acted upon, she added. But to describe it as a kidnapping or to suggest that any member of cabinet or any member of the permanent secretary class of government in Barbados is involved in kidnapping is a scurrilous lie and defamatory in the extreme. We all know what transpired, and it is regrettable what happened. However, Motley said the long-standing informal practice of executing arrest warrants between Caribbean states underscored the need for legislative reform. So this is an important thing, and it kind of gives you insight into the mentality and character of Kamala Prasad Bisesa, the most shameless.
Brother Isaac? Brother Isaac?
My question to Brother Ak was sort of related to this idea like of Caribbean unity, right? Okay. Can CARICOM survive these fissures, right? And do we need a new vision of what Caribbean unity means, i.e. Rooted in the masses?
Absolutely. You know, there's another article, maybe I should read that article since you posed that question. It's an article in which the commentator is suggesting that we build CARICOM from the ground up. Now, most of these institutions we have in the Caribbean are built from the top down. So what you have, for example, the Federation, it was a gathering of the leaders and the people, even though the people sentimentally agreed with it from the point of view of the unity of the Caribbean, given they are more or less the same people, the same history. It was not a project that was built from the ground up, right? And it's the same thing with CARICOM. CARICOM was a project that was started by the leaders of the Caribbean. And up to now, there has been no significant, what I call institution that CARICOM has built, possibly the exception of the Caribbean. Prior to independence for most of these Caribbean countries, we had two boats, the MV Federal Maple and the MV Federal Palm. These boats moved from Trinidad, which is furthest in the south, to Jamaica in the north, moving goods and people during the colonial era. Okay? So we had a connection, direct connection with the Caribbean by ship. Okay? In the post-independence period, I think the two boats were given to Trinidad. It lasted for a while and the thing collapsed. But a simple thing like that, where marine transport could be developed to link the people of the Caribbean, because a port, a small port, is a simple thing to build, right? Four boats are not hard to acquire, right? With all the modern technologies, if it was done pre-independence and for a short period after independence, why it is as a project, CARICOM could not have had marine transport that could move goods and people throughout the Caribbean. And that gives you an example of the paucity and the puerile nature of what I call CARICOM. You know, And on any fundamental issue, it has never really developed cohesion. So CARICOM is more or less a paper tiger. It is something that they least benefit from. For example, all the capital can move to the Caribbean, the elites can move to the Caribbean. A mason in St. Vincent cannot get a job in Trinidad, even though we have a shortage of masons. So it was never geared towards the working class. You understand? Like Jamaica is experiencing a shortage of skilled technical people right now. Right? So even though we have the so-called freedom of movement in the Caribbean, you can't get masons from Trinidad or Antigua going to Jamaica because they have put all the legislative blockages in space to prevent the integration of the Caribbean, while on one level talking about integration and freedom of movement. So yes, there is a need for a new vision. Like we need to organize our politics differently and our economics differently, we need to reorganize the Caribbean to serve the interests of the people, to answer your question.
Okay, brother Isaac, you want to add anything else?
No, I think this. This is the key point, right? Because this issue of Caribbean unity, right? Pan-Caribbean, the Pan-Caribbean vision, right, is one that's obviously resurfaced given, right, the fact that Trinidad has said the Trinidad government they're going to rupture at CARICOM, and in fact have criticized it significantly, right? So one of the issues that we have in discussion is, can CARICOM be the vehicle for reinvigoration of missions, or do we have to build something completely new, right? And I've always been a believer in Caribbean unity from the ground up, okay, rooted in the masses. So I think Brother Ako has captured everything very, very clearly, right? And that, the vision these guys have put forward has either been one that's basically just been performativity, rhetoric, and also one that's been, if it has anything in terms of policies, has been driven by the elites. And the elites' interests with the working people, as we have discussed earlier in this program, are completely divergent.
Thanks, Brother Ako. We only have about 5 minutes.
Okay, so the last story here, which is to me a most important story that applies to the rest of the Caribbean. It's an article out of Guyana, and it's titled "Guyana's Oil Wealth to Help Lift the World from Poverty. Exxon Upstream Boss Tells Energy Confab." So, delivering the keynote address at the opening day of the 5th installment of the Guyana Energy Conference and Supply Chain Expo, the president of ExxonMobil Upstream Company and vice president of the corporation, Dan Amman, spoke glowingly of the country's energy potential and the crucial role it plays in the company. Right? President Amman said, with an eagle's eye view of the country, I can very confidently say that Ghana is perhaps the most energy development anywhere in the world, not only for the scale of the resources offshore, but how it's being developed and managed, and importantly, what it is enabling offshore. Shifting his attention to the role Ghana will play on a much wider level, he said the country's resources will help improve the lives of people across the globe, with the country already experiencing transformation. First, energy development is transforming this country. You can see it everywhere. New construction, hospitals. Hearing this European American talking about Ghana's energy will help solve global poverty. American companies and capitalism have never been interested in solving global poverty. I remembered in an interview, and I'm waiting for Brother Saney to come. I remember in an interview, the former mayor of New York, his son was the governor. He was the governor of New York, not Giuliani. I don't remember his name now, but his son was the governor caught in a scandal. And he was making an argument, the Republicans was making an argument that the civil rights legislation did not solve the problem of discrimination. And Governor Cuomo at the time. And Cuomo in his response said, so okay, that may be true, but America is a capitalist society and it has never solved the problem of poverty. So what are we going to say? Are we going to dismantle capitalism? Because it has never solved the problem of poverty for 500 years. So to hear this idiot ExxonMobil man saying that Guyana's oil wealth will benefit the world. It's not even benefiting Guyana's people. Trinidad wealth didn't benefit Trinidad people. There's a, and I'm going to make this last point. Recently, it was proven that Niger is one of the richest countries in Africa by resources. It has uranium, it has oil. And the French was exploiting Niger's resources to the point that Niger was making more money out of selling onions than selling uranium. So for our leaders to sit and hear this man talk this hogwash, and sit there and no journalist or political analyst is analyzing this in a way. This is part of our history, you know. So I would stop here.
No, I would say why some of them from the leadership accepts this hogwash is because they're going to benefit. Compradors always benefit, right? Okay, I mean, that's been the nature of the system, right? They get a comprador class in the country they're exploiting, right? And they will benefit while the vast majority don't see any of the wealth. And we haven't even spoken about like the kind of massive environmental damage that will be done, right? As you know, there was a lot of, if you can correct me if I'm wrong, but there's a lot of gold exploration in Guyana, right? And you know, gold, when you're mining for gold, we find there's a lot of cyanide involved, and there's massive pollution caused by all this cyanide. That's a byproduct of extracting this gold and so forth. So yeah, it's truly astonishing. But that's one of the marks of this age we're living in, right? This age of psychotic capitalism, this age of capitalism and its decline, this age of madness of imperialism, right? Is these kind of things, these stupidities, right? Okay, these things that seem completely beyond any logic are commonplace utterances by individuals, and nobody challenges them. It's like, you know, with this latest assault and war and aggression against Iran. Didn't Trump months ago say that, and he said, that all of Iran's capacity to make nuclear weapons is completely obliterated? And then they regenerate the same pretext that Iran is and Iran has always been a day or two, or a week or two from producing nuclear weapons for over 30 years, right? And so these things happen. And so there's even a crime against logic itself, against rationality that's become marked, where people say all sorts of madness. So this hogwash, okay, that Brother Akko has amply underscored and underlined and pointed out, right? You know, it just beggars the imagination, boggles the mind. But people are willing to sell, they sell out the patrimony of their country if they can enrich themselves, their cronies, and their families.
Give thanks. Give thanks for the reasoning. We're just about out of time. You have something to say, Brother Akko?
Yeah, well, what I wanted to say is what Thomas Sankara said. Imperialism is a bad student. He repeats the same errors all the time. Killing. No, that's not the truth. Your eyes are lying to you. And that is the reality of the new era of capitalism that we live.
Thank you. Final thoughts. You have like a minute, Brother Isaac, then Brother Akko, and then we have to lock up for the day.
I just think that, the final thoughts is the struggle continues. The stakes are incredibly high. It involves the survival of humanity. And Brother Akko, and I think you mentioned as well earlier, the capacity to imagine a new world, the radical imagination, right? Okay, to envision that we can live in a different world. And I think that's critically important.
Much for your presence today, Brother Isaac Saney from Halifax, Canada. Big respect. Brother Akko?
So, Sister YaYa, in closing, I would say that our people have to unlearn what they have learned. This is a statement Marcus Garvey made. We have to unlearn what we have learned. And we have to embrace new ideas of who we are, which is rooted in our own realities. And this is something we have to begin the process intellectually and not get confused by what I consider the intellectual and cognitive dissonance that they have imposed upon us through propaganda, through their media, and all their various forms of the media. We have to unlearn what has been learned, and we have to begin to think and imagine a different way to support it.
Big thanks, Brother Akko Mutota. And I hear, but for enough people who will listen, they're like, okay, so how you do that? Like, people stay in a survival mode. But we have to come up with solutions, and there could be people doing things in communities that we don't know about that if we knew about it, we'd be like, okay, this is what we need to connect with. These people are credible, then do something creative and maybe be small, but it'll make one difference for individuals actually relearn. And one big part of that is we need to know ourselves. I say if we don't know ourselves, we don't have no interest in knowing ourselves. How we ain't got interest in learning anything outside ourselves? So big thanks for the reasoning today. The security guard, again, and encourage Belizeans, people in the Caribbean, Belizeans by example. And I really appreciate that, that we think for ourselves and then engage others and hold power accountable. Remember, say, only organized people must save the people. One love.
All right.
Nobody do it to no Guatemala. This time me name is Pupa. Belize me come from the Belize City area. 110% Belize and proud of it, sir. Don't tell me about maritime area. Long time ago agreement by the slave master. Talking about the head on the Belize and dollar because patriots. All people who love them country bad love them homeland. Will never give it up to another nation.